"Stop right there, young man." The voice was deep, commanding, and carried a weight of authority that made the boy freeze instantly. His thin frame stiffened, as though someone had caught him doing something wrong. Slowly, he turned around, squinting against the afternoon sun, and what he saw almost stole the breath from his chest. A shiny black car had stopped it in the middle of the dusty road. Not just any car. It was the kind of car no one in this village had ever seen up close before. Its polished surface gleamed like a mirror, reflecting the golden sky and the clouds that lazily floated above. The rims sparkled, the tires looked new, and the tinted windows made it seem like some mysterious creature from another world had landed in their quiet, forgotten village. The boy's bare feet were coated in dirt, his worn-out shorts hanging loosely on his bony frame, and his shirt had more patches than fabric. He clutched a small cloth bag in one hand, inside of which he carried a few mangoes he had picked from a tree earlier. He was used to dusty bicycles, squeaky donkey carts, and the occasional rusty motorbike passing through the road. But this magnificent car was like a spaceship compared to everything he knew. From the back seat of the car, the door opened with a quiet click, and out stepped a man. The boy's mouth dropped slightly. The man looked like he had walked straight out of a movie. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a perfectly tailored dark suit that seemed to carry its own aura of power. A golden watch gleamed on his wrist every time the sunlight touched it. His shoes were polished so sharply, they looked like they had never touched dirt in their lives. His hair was neatly combed, his jawline sharp, and his eyes, dark, piercing eyes, looked at the boy with an intensity that made his heart pound. This man didn't belong here. He wasn't from the world of broken huts, cracked roads, and people struggling to survive day by day. He was from the world of glass towers, boardrooms, and marble floors. He was a billionaire. The boy swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how small and insignificant he must have looked in front of someone so powerful. "Yes, you," the man repeated firmly, his voice carrying both impatience and authority. "Do you know where Mrs. Evelyn Carter lives?" The boy's eyes widened at the mention of the name. He knew her. Everyone in this part of the village knew her. Mrs. Evelyn Carter was a woman who didn't quite fit in either. She was kind, graceful, and carried herself with quiet dignity. Even though she lived modestly, she had helped the boy many times before, sometimes giving him food when he went hungry. He nodded quickly, almost too eagerly. "Yes, sir. I know where she lives. It's not far from here." The billionaire's eyes softened slightly at the boy's eagerness, but his tone remained steady. "Good. Then show me the way." The boy hesitated for only a second before he nodded again. "Yes, sir. I'll take you." He turned, clutching his small bag of mangoes tighter, and began walking ahead. His bare feet kicked up small clouds of dust with every step. Behind him, the car rolled forward slowly, its powerful engine humming like a caged animal. The boy could feel the weight of it, following him like a giant shadow. From inside the car, the billionaire lowered the window slightly, watching the boy carefully. Something about him caught his attention in a way he couldn't quite understand. He noticed how the boy's shirt was too big for his small frame, how his shoulders seemed weighed down by more than just poverty, and how, despite everything, there was a spark in his eyes, an innocence mixed with quiet strength. A man who spent his life chasing numbers, deals, and empires, this sudden curiosity unsettled him. He was not used to being distracted by strangers, yet here he was, unable to look away from the poor barefoot boy leading his way. The boy, meanwhile, felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. Never in his life had someone so important followed him. Usually, he was the one being told what to do, ignored, or pushed aside. But right now, he was the guide, the one in charge, and though he tried to hide it, he felt important for the first time in his life. As they moved along the road, the village began to stir with whispers. Children paused their games, their eyes wide as they pointed at the gleaming car crawling behind the boy. Women carrying baskets of vegetables stopped mid-step, shading their eyes from the sun as they tried to see who this mysterious visitor was. Old men sitting under the shade of a banyan tree leaned forward, murmuring among themselves, wondering what business a man of such wealth could possibly have in their simple village. The boy could feel their stares, but instead of shrinking, he stood a little taller. For once, he wasn't just another poor child running errands. He was the one showing the way for a man who looked like he ruled the world. The billionaire continued to study him, his sharp mind trying to make sense of the strange pull he felt toward the boy, the way he walked, the way he tilted his head when looking back. even the nervous little smile that occasionally tugged at his lips. It all felt familiar. He couldn't place it, but the resemblance to someone he once knew nagged at him. The air between them grew heavier with every step, though neither said much. The boy only glanced back every now and then, his eyes filled with a mix of awe and curiosity. The man, however, felt something he hadn't felt in years, a stirring in his chest, like a shadow from the past was slowly walking back into his life. He leaned back in his seat, adjusting his golden watch, but his mind was no longer focused on his destination. It was on the boy, the poor child with dust on his feet and a spark in his eyes. And though he didn't know it yet, fate had just led him straight into the arms of a truth that would change his life forever. The boy scratched his head nervously, his fingers leaving faint streaks of dust on his forehead. He glanced at the tall, intimidating man in the suit, and then gave a small, shy smile. That smile was faint, fragile, almost hidden, like it belonged to someone who hadn't been given much reason to smile in life. "Yes, sir," the boy said softly. "I know where she lives. It's not far from here." The billionaire studied him with a frown that wasn't quite anger, but more like deep thought. There was something about the boy, something strangely familiar, like a shadow of the past he couldn't name. His eyes, the curve of his cheek, the way he smiled despite his worn-out clothes. It stirred a restlessness inside the billionaire that he didn't like to admit. He cleared his throat, brushing off the feeling. "Good. Can you show me the way?" The boy nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. Follow me." And so he began to walk, his thin frame leading the way while the glossy black car crawled slowly behind him. The driver kept the car at a respectful distance, but the billionaire leaned forward slightly, watching the boy with keen eyes. The boy's steps were quick but light. He had no shoes, only bare feet hardened by years of running across rough ground. Dust rose with each step, clinging to his ankles. Yet, despite his poverty, he moved with a kind of energy, as though life had tried to crush him but hadn't succeeded completely. The billionaire leaned back, silently observing. For years, his life had been about control, controlling people, controlling markets, controlling every unpredictable detail of business. Yet here he was, following a barefoot boy through narrow roads, unable to shake the strange connection he felt. The boy, meanwhile, kept glancing at the car. Every time he looked, his eyes widened with wonder. He had never seen such wealth up close. In his imagination, only kings or movie stars owned such things. He could almost see his reflection in the smooth surface of the car's hood when the sun hit it. Inside, his heart swelled with pride. For once, he wasn't invisible. For once, someone important needed him. "Sir," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "Mrs. Evelyn. She is a good woman. She helps me sometimes." The billionaire's ears sharpened at the name. He sat up straighter, his chest tightening. "She helps you?" he asked carefully. The boy nodded, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "Yes. When I'm hungry, she gives me food. Sometimes bread, sometimes soup. She says I remind her of someone she used to know." The billionaire's hand tightened around his golden watch. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on him. Evelyn, his ex-wife, the woman he once loved, the woman he left behind. Memories stirred inside him, painful and sharp. He took a deep breath. "Do you live with your parents, boy?" The boy's expression faltered. His shoulders slumped a little as he stared at the road beneath his dusty feet. "No, sir. My mother. She passed away some years ago, and my father, I never knew him." Those words hit the billionaire harder than he expected. He wasn't a man who allowed emotions to show on his face, but at that moment his throat tightened. He looked out the window, blinking against the sting in his eyes. Something about this boy, the way he spoke, the sadness in his smile, the absence of a father, pierced right through the billionaire's guarded heart. The boy continued walking, unaware of the storm his words had stirred inside the man behind him. "It's okay," he added quickly, as if trying to make the silence less heavy. "I manage, I do small jobs, I help people carry things. Sometimes I sell fruits." He lifted the small bag of mangoes he carried, as though to prove his point. "These are for my supper." The billionaire's chest ached. Here was a boy who had nothing, yet he still smiled. A boy who walked barefoot on burning ground, yet carried himself with dignity. And somehow, he felt as though fate had pulled their paths together for a reason he didn't yet understand. As they passed through the village, people's eyes followed. Children pointed, their laughter mixing with curiosity. Women paused their chores to stare at the sleek car moving behind the boy. Men under a tree muttered among themselves, suspicious and curious at once. But the boy, he walked with his head a little higher because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just another poor kid. He was guiding someone powerful. The billionaire's eyes softened as he thought again of Evelyn. He had come here seeking her, perhaps for answers, perhaps for closure. But now, with this boy leading him, his mind swirled with unease. There was something about him he couldn't dismiss. When the boy smiled again, faint but real, the billionaire's heart clenched. It was a smile of survival, of pain hidden beneath innocence. And without knowing why, the billionaire thought, "I've seen that smile before." Little did he know, the road he was traveling wasn't just leading him to Evelyn's house. It was leading him straight into the truth of his own blood. Curved into a quieter part of the village, the houses grew smaller, more fragile, their walls cracked, their roofs patched with tin sheets and old cloth. Chickens pecked at the dust, and an old woman sat outside, weaving baskets, glancing curiously at the strange sight of a luxury car crawling along behind a barefoot boy. The boy walked steadily, clutching his bag of mangoes, his voice breaking the silence. "Mrs. Evelyn. She's a kind woman. She helps me sometimes when I'm hungry." The billionaire's chest tightened at the sound of her name. He shifted slightly in his seat, staring out of the window as though the mere mention of Evelyn's kindness burned his pride. "Helps you?" he asked, his tone low, careful. The boy nodded quickly, his dusty hair bouncing with the movement. "Yes, sir. She never turns me away. Even when she has little herself, she shares. People say she's strange, that she doesn't belong here, but I like her. She listens when I talk." The billionaire's jaw clenched. The image of Evelyn formed sharply in his mind. Her gentle face, her quiet strength, the way she used to look at him with eyes full of hope and trust. He remembered her laughter, the softness in her voice when she told him she believed in him, even when no one else did. But then, like a shadow across sunlight, came the memories he had buried for years. The fights, the bitter words, his obsession with wealth and power that grew heavier with every passing day, the pride that had kept him from admitting his mistakes. And then, the final blow, their separation. He had walked away, leaving Evelyn with tears in her eyes. At the time, he told himself it was necessary. He told himself that love was a distraction, that a man could not build an empire while clinging to the past. But now, hearing her name spoken by a poor barefoot boy, the billionaire felt the cracks in the wall he had built around his heart. He leaned forward, his voice quieter now, almost reluctant. "Tell me, boy, do you live with your parents?" The boy slowed his steps, his shoulders slumped a little, and for the first time, his voice carried a weight heavier than his small body. "No, sir. My mother, she passed away when I was younger. And my father, I never knew him." The billionaire froze. Those words hit him harder than any business failure, harder than any betrayal he had faced in boardrooms. He sat back, his hand tightening on the armrest of the leather seat, his golden watch digging into his wrist. A fatherless boy, a boy who had lost his mother too soon, a boy who walked alone in the world, smiling despite the weight he carried. The billionaire swallowed, his throat dry. Why did this feel so personal? Why did it feel like the boy's sorrow was his own? He forced himself to ask, though his voice trembled slightly. "And how do you manage?" The boy gave a small shrug, his sad smile flickering again. "I do small jobs, sir. Carry bags, sweep floors, sell fruits. Sometimes people give me coins, sometimes they don't. But I manage." He lifted his bag of mangoes, the corners of his mouth twitching with pride. "Like today. I climbed the tree and picked these. Tonight, I will eat." The billionaire pressed his lips together, a storm raging inside him. He was a man who could sign a paper and move millions of dollars in an instant. He could build skyscrapers, buy companies, silence competitors. Yet here was a boy, surviving on mangoes, living day by day, with no father to guide him and no mother to hold him. And Evelyn, his Evelyn, was the one helping him. The silence stretched heavy between them. The billionaire turned his gaze away, his mind spiraling into the past. He remembered the last time he saw Evelyn's face, framed with sorrow. Her voice echoed in his ears, soft but sharp. "One day, you will regret choosing money over love." The time he had laughed bitterly. Regret? Him? A man destined to rule industries? A man with ambition burning in his veins? Love, he thought then, was for the weak. But now, staring at the boy's thin back as he led the way, regret pressed down on him like a weight he could no longer ignore. The boy spoke again, breaking the billionaire's thoughts. Mrs. Evelyn told me once that life is like a road. Sometimes it's rough, sometimes it's smooth. But if you keep walking, you'll get somewhere. He smiled faintly, glancing back at the car. She says I remind her of someone she once cared about. The billionaire's heart thudded painfully. Someone she once cared about. His chest tightened, and for a moment he had to look away. Could Evelyn have meant him? The boy didn't notice the man's inner turmoil. He kept walking, steady and sure, though his clothes were torn, and his steps left small prints in the dust. He was used to carrying burdens heavier than himself. Hunger, loneliness, the sharp absence of a father. He bore them all with a resilience that made the billionaire's chest ache. Inside the car, the billionaire's thoughts churned. He had come to see Evelyn, perhaps to settle old wounds, perhaps to understand why his heart still ached when he thought of her. But now, with this boy guiding him, the wounds felt fresher, sharper. He remembered the day Evelyn told him she was pregnant. Her face had been glowing, her hands trembling with excitement as she whispered, "We're going to be parents." At that time he had been torn, part of him thrilled, the other part terrified that fatherhood would tie him down, slow him from reaching the empire he dreamed of. He had never asked what happened after he left. He had buried it all under years of success and riches, but now the thought clawed at him. What if Evelyn had raised the child alone? What if... He shook his head sharply, forcing himself back to the present. That was impossible. It had been years. And this boy? No. He couldn't allow himself to think such thoughts. Yet every time he looked at the boy's shy smile, every time he heard the sadness hidden in his voice, the possibility grew harder to dismiss. The car continued to crawl behind the boy, dust rising in little clouds. The sun sank lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. The world seemed suspended in a strange silence, like destiny itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when truth would finally break free. And deep inside the billionaire's chest, a fear he had never known before began to take root. Because something told him that this poor, fatherless boy was not just a stranger. He was the living echo of a painful past, a past that was about to come crashing back into his life in ways he could not yet imagine. The boy slowed his pace as the road narrowed. The car's tires crunched softly against the gravel, until finally, he stopped in front of a small, modest house tucked away at the edge of the village. "There, sir," the boy said, pointing with his thin arm. "This is where she lives." The billionaire stepped out of the car, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft dirt. He straightened his suit jacket, but his usual confidence wasn't there. For the first time in years, his heartbeat was uneven, his chest heavy with a mix of dread and longing. The house before him was nothing like the grand mansions he had grown accustomed to. The walls were weathered, painted once but now faded by time and rain. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, patched with sheets of tin. A small garden grew at the side, wild but cared for, bright flowers fighting to bloom among weeds. It was humble, simple, but it carried a warmth that no mansion could ever hold. The boy watched him closely, his curious eyes flickering between the grand man in the suit and the small house before them. He didn't understand why the billionaire looked so unsettled. The billionaire took a slow step forward, then another. Each footfall felt like it carried the weight of years, years of pride, years of separation, years of silence. His hand trembled slightly as he raised it to knock. The wooden door creaked open, and there she was, Evelyn. Her face had changed with time, yet remained unmistakable. The youthful glow had softened into maturity, her features lined with quiet strength and struggles overcome. Her hair, streaked with threads of silver, was tied neatly behind her, but her eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, still carried the same light he remembered, though now it was shadowed by sorrow. The moment her gaze fell on him, she froze. Her lips parted, her breath catching in her throat. The color drained from her face as if she had seen a ghost. "You?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Why are you here?" The billionaire opened his mouth to speak, but no words came at first. He had faced world leaders, commanded boardrooms, and silenced powerful men with a single glance. But now, in front of Evelyn, he felt like the same young man who had once begged for her forgiveness. He finally managed, his voice low, rough. I came to see you. Evelyn's hand tightened on the edge of the door, as though she needed support to stand. After all these years, after everything, why now? Before he could answer, Evelyn's eyes shifted, her expression changing from shock to horror. Her gaze fell on the boy standing quietly beside him, clutching his bag of mangoes, his wide eyes darting between the two adults. Her lips trembled as she whispered, almost choking on the words. Why is my son with you? The billionaire's head snapped toward the boy. Your son? His voice cracked with disbelief. The boy looked up, confused. Your son? He repeated softly, pointing at himself. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, spilling down her cheeks as years of silence shattered in an instant. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. He's my son. Your son. The words struck the billionaire like a thunderclap. He staggered back a step, his knees weak. His eyes darted between Evelyn's tear-streaked face and the boy's innocent, bewildered one. No, he whispered, shaking his head. That can't be. But deep inside, he knew. He had felt it from the moment he saw the boy. The strange familiarity, the way his heart had ached without reason, the way the boy's smile had pierced through his soul. Now the truth roared in his ears, undeniable. The boy's voice, small and trembling, broke the silence. Is it true? You're my father. Billionaire dropped to his knees, his golden watch glinting in the fading light. For the first time in decades, tears filled his eyes. He had faced financial ruin and clawed his way back. He had fought enemies in business and crushed them without mercy, but nothing had ever broken him like this moment. His voice shook as he reached out a trembling hand. Son, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Forgive me. Please forgive me. The boy stepped back, confusion clouding his young face. He had grown up longing for a father he never knew, imagining what he might look like, what he might say. And now, the father he had dreamed of was kneeling in the dirt before him, crying like a broken man. Evelyn's sobs grew louder as she watched. All the pain she had buried, the betrayal, the loneliness, the struggle of raising a child alone, came crashing back. Yet, alongside the anger, there was relief too. For years she had carried the secret, believing he would never return, that he would never know. And now, fate had dragged him back to the very truth he had abandoned. The billionaire's shoulders shook as tears streamed down his face. I thought I was building a life, he whispered, but I was only running from the one thing that mattered most. Evelyn. I left you. I left him. And I can never take back that mistake. The boy's small hand trembled as he slowly reached out, placing it gently in his father's. His voice was soft, hesitant. I always wondered who my father was. I thought maybe he didn't care. But maybe you do. The billionaire's heart broke and healed all at once. He pulled the boy into his arms, holding him tightly, as though making up for every lost year in one embrace. I care more than anything, he said through tears. I promise you, I will never leave you again. Never. Evelyn, standing in the doorway, wiped her tears. Her heart was torn, still angry, still wounded, but unable to deny the sight before her. The man she once loved, the man who had abandoned her, was now clinging to the child he never knew he had. For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen in the golden light of the setting sun, bound together by pain, regret, love, and a truth too powerful to ignore. And though words of forgiveness had yet to be spoken, something had shifted. The past had returned, the truth had been revealed, and the chance for redemption had finally arrived. The world felt frozen in that moment. The setting sun bathed the small house in golden light, as though heaven itself had chosen to witness this fragile reunion. Dust floated gently in the air, the only sound the quiet hum of the car's engine still idling nearby. The billionaire knelt in the dirt, his expensive suit smudged, his knees pressed into the ground that had never known luxury. In front of him stood the boy, his son, the child he never knew, the child he had unknowingly abandoned. Tears blurred his vision as he held the boy close, his arms trembling with desperation. Son, he whispered, his voice breaking, I can't change the past. I can't bring back the years I lost, but I swear to you, from this day forward, you will never walk alone again. The boy stiffened at first, unused to such an embrace. His small hands twitched, uncertain whether to pull away or hold on. But the warmth in the man's arms, the warmth of a father he had dreamed about for so long, melted his hesitation. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped his thin arms around his father's shoulders. For the first time in his life, he felt what it meant to belong. Evelyn stood at the doorway, her heart pounding. Her eyes overflowed with tears, not just of sorrow, but of overwhelming emotions she had fought to suppress for years. She had imagined this moment countless times, the man who had left her on his knees, begging for forgiveness, but never had she pictured it like this. Not with their son in the middle, not with such raw sincerity. "Why now?" Evelyn asked finally, her voice trembling but firm. "Why after all these years? Do you think it's easy for me to forgive? You left me when I needed you the most. You left him." She gestured toward the boy, her hands shaking. "Do you know how many nights I stayed awake, wondering how I would feed him? Do you know what it was like to answer his questions when he asked where his father was?" The billionaire bowed his head, unable to meet her eyes. "I was a fool," he admitted, his voice choked. "I thought wealth would make me powerful. I thought success would erase the emptiness inside me. But the higher I climbed, the lonelier I became. And now I see what I lost was worth more than all the money in the world." Evelyn's lips trembled. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the pain that had kept her strong. But seeing him there, broken and weeping, clinging to the boy they shared, it tore down the walls she had built brick by brick. The boy looked up, his innocent eyes glistening. "Mama," he said softly, "he's crying. Maybe he's sorry." The simple childlike words pierced through Evelyn's defenses more than any apology could. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking as sobs she had hidden for years finally escaped. The billionaire turned to her, his eyes pleading. "Evelyn, I can't erase the pain I caused. I can't give you back the years I stole. But please, let me try to make it right. Let me be the father he deserves. Let me be there, for both of you." For a long moment, Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, her tears falling silently. Then, with a trembling sigh, she stepped forward. She knelt beside them, her hand gently brushing the boy's hair. Her eyes met the billionaire's, filled with both pain and reluctant hope. "You don't deserve a second chance," she whispered. "But maybe. He does." She looked at their son. "He deserves a father. He deserves love." The billionaire reached out, his hand covering hers over the boy's small shoulder. "Then let me prove myself," he said earnestly. "Not with money, not with gifts, but with my heart. I'll be here. I'll fight for him. I'll fight for us, if you'll let me." The boy's voice broke the heavy silence once more. "Can we be a family?" His question was so simple, so pure, it shattered whatever bitterness lingered in the air. Evelyn's eyes closed as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe we can try." The billionaire pulled them both into his arms, holding them tightly, as though terrified the moment might slip away. His sobs shook his chest, raw and unrestrained, while Evelyn finally allowed herself to lean into his embrace. For years she had carried the weight of pain alone, but in that instant, she let some of it go. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the village road. Neighbors peeked from a distance, whispering about the rich man who had come in his shining car, only to fall to his knees before a poor boy and a woman who had endured in silence. But for the three of them, the world had faded away. There was no wealth, no poverty, no past mistakes, only the fragile but undeniable bond of family. The billionaire looked at his son, his heart swelling with a love he never thought himself capable of. "From this day forward," he vowed, his voice steady despite his tears, "you will never go hungry again. You will never wonder if your father cares. You will never be alone. You are my son, my blood, my life." The boy smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. It wasn't the shy, sad smile he had worn before. It was bright, full, radiant. It was the smile of a child who finally felt seen, finally felt loved. Evelyn watched, her heart aching, but also healing. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust once broken was not easily mended. But in her son's eyes, in his smile, she saw hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the billionaire stood, lifting his son gently into his arms. For the first time, he didn't feel like a powerful businessman or a man of wealth. He simply felt like a father, a man who had been lost but had finally found his way home. And as they walked back toward the small house together, the dust rising behind them, it was clear that this was not an ending. It was a beginning. A beginning of forgiveness. A beginning of redemption. A beginning of a family, reunited at last,